Hi. It feels a bit weird standing behind here, but I don't know, just because I'm quite short, I just feel like I should be on a box or something. Hi, my name's Martin, and this is...
Hi, I'm Laura.
We both work for the Raspberry Pi Foundation. I'm actually Laura's replacement.
So I've been on maternity leave. This is my first week back. It's a bit of a big week, very exciting. But yeah, so we both work for the Raspberry Pi Foundation, hence why there's Raspberry Pi all over the slides. This talk is actually nothing to do with Raspberry Pi, but there we go.
Excellent. So I want to talk about how coding doesn't have to be difficult. So I'm sure many of you have noticed that over the last few years, this idea of kind of zero Python libraries have been kind of popping up everywhere, or kind of libraries that sort of take that ethos, starting with APIzero. Hi, Daniel. Yeah, so starting with APIzero, and these packages are, aimed at to have kind of zero boilerplate. You don't need a lot to get going. Yeah. And they take away that kind of hassle and that friction of coding. And friction is going to be something that we're perhaps going to talk a lot about. And on balance of kind of features and ease of use, they prioritize simplicity over complexity.
So basically, I came to PyCon first 2 years ago, and I used to be a teacher, and at that point I had just stopped being a teacher. But I had a big frustration, so that when I was teaching in the classroom, kids wanted to be able to do things that they were sort of experiencing at home. So for example, lots of kids play games and they come into the classroom and they're like, yes, I've been playing Overwatch, I'm going to make something like this in computing, and then actually they end up making something a bit like this, and they're kind of a bit like that, and it's all a bit slightly disappointing. So even if they could make something just even as basic as that, so with some colors and buttons and things like that, that's much more exciting than just something basically text-based. So I thought, great, let's make the kids be able to do something like this. But the problem was, to get them to be able to do that, then they had to, using sort of the basics that's installed tkinter, they had to do something like that. And there were loads of things in that code there, sort of a really basic code for just a very simple GUI, that actually is nothing like what they had been learning, so the basics, the hello world, the loops, and that kind of thing. And that was very hard for them to reconcile with what they already knew. So my idea really was to try and get something going so that they could make GUIs much more simply, which resulted in guizero. So guizero is basically like a wrapper, I suppose, around tkinter. The whole point of it being that it's really, really basic. You can very quickly and easily get something started, and you don't have to deal with a load of boilerplate that the kids didn't actually need to use and got frustrated and irritated by. So that is what came out of this. This started at PyCon 2 years ago, when there was, maybe some of you were at it, there was like a talk, sort of a union between developers and teachers, where people got into groups and discussed different things that they could do to make things easier in education, and then this sort of came out of that, basically.
Yeah, so what I want to talk about is, we've kind of talked a little bit about guizero and the kind of problems that we experience. And I want to talk a little bit about how, when we create Python libraries and APIs, it just needs to be more friendly. Yeah? It needs to be, not just in the sense of using it, but it's got to be nice. Yeah? It's got to be a good experience. Yeah? And what I'm going to try and hopefully convince all of you people of is that being friendly, is good not only for new learners, it's good for experts too. So, and there's a kind of couple of points that I want to go through. So the first one is installation. Yeah? Now, we talk about friction. This is this barrier. Yeah? And if you create any barrier, you're going to lose people. And whether that's a product that you've created, or whether it's just an open source library you want to use, any friction, you will lose people. And the first point you will lose people is at installation. And it's important that we understand our users' constraints, yeah? Be that environmental, so for example, guizero is very much targeted at educators, and we have to accept that they have constraints, environmental constraints, yeah? Things like dependencies. If we've got a dependency within our package that's really hard to get hold of, yeah? If it's hard for us to get hold of, it's hard for everybody else to get hold of. But also, this psychological bit as well. This installation part is a bit scary. And it's scary for everybody because we are engaging in something new, something unknown. Yeah? And there's just the good old-fashioned, God, I don't have time for that. Yeah? And this is why installation is so important. If you turn people off at this stage, you will probably lose them forever. So help people install what you give them. Provide instructions. Provide alternative options, yeah? To cater for people who perhaps can't run a command line. Yeah.
So from my point of view as a teacher, I actually gave a talk at PyCon 2 years ago where I had a little bit of a rant about pip, because most teachers who I know have no idea what pip is. They don't know where to type pip commands. They usually type them into the idle shell, and then things don't work, and they get very confused and upset. And I just sort of thought, I don't want to have a situation for guizero where people have to install it with pip because nobody's going to use it. You can install it with pip. Happy days, it's very nice and easy, but I would say that the vast majority of teachers that I have spoken to who use it go onto the GitHub and download it as a zip, and that's for two reasons. Partly one, because then they don't have to get any administrators involved, so it's often quite a massive hassle to get something installed on a school network, and you have to go and talk to the technicians, and they make sort of kind of noises at you, and then and then nothing happens for 3 weeks, and by then the moment's passed. So they can just bypass that, download the zip file, whack it on a shared drive, and then the kids can do it literally the next day. So I wanted to avoid that friction for teachers specifically, but also to provide this nice pip installation as well, so that if somebody was able to use that and knew how to do that, then they could do that too.
The next thing I want to talk about is defaults. You all know about Python, yeah? Yeah? Okay, that's good. So Python has a great thing, like parameter defaults. Honestly, just brilliant. Yeah. And I think there's a really important point here, which is, every interface requires parameters. However, for the vast majority of people, we can use a default. And I think often, and I lost sight of this, I didn't create interfaces which worked for the majority. I created interfaces that worked for every scenario. Yeah? Because I'd been trained to think that way. So this is an extract from GPIO0. This is the first meme I ever created, by the way. I was quite pleased with myself. For some people, giving a pull-up, a bounce time, a hold repeat, and a pin factory are like super important. So it's important that they're there. But the vast majority of people have no interest in that at all. So actually, let's take that complexity away and let's hide it. Let's create defaults for those things which are just typical. And if we understand our use cases and we understand the people that use our products, we can do that. Yeah.
So regarding guizero in this aspect, I wanted to make it as simple as possible to try to get people started. So this is sort of the simplest program that you can possibly do that brings up a lovely box for a GUI and actually usually makes people go, ooh. And it involves loads of defaults. So you can set things if you want to, like the size of the window and the title of the window and the background color and yada, 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 all that stuff. But actually, if you just want to get it running, that's literally what you have to write, and it comes up with a nice window. So just to try and get away from having to put stuff, like lots and lots of different options in just to get something on the screen and make it optional to add that makes it easier.
Familiarity. I think certainly I found myself as a developer, I wanted to put my kind of own stamp on everything that I did. And I really liked that. But actually, it doesn't help a lot of people. I kind of thought, and actually, if there is an established pattern, And what I have learned recently is that it's so much better to follow it. Even if it just like knocks you a little bit. But actually, if something's familiar, people feel comfortable almost instantly. And if the kind of parting point for this is, if a pattern exists, use it. Even if it's just a little bit out of the way, because the benefits of that familiarity far outweigh the friction that you will create by somebody going, "Oh, what does this thing mean?"
So when I was using just basic TK with kids in school, they found sort of certain things very difficult to understand why they even had to do it, and they were really unfamiliar. So they didn't understand, for example, that to just clear any text out of text box, they would have to specify the starting and the ending character. They found it very difficult to understand foreground red being that this is the color of the text. Why is that? That's confusing. The most common thing that they did was they forgot to pack their widgets once they'd created them, because they just, conceptually, why do I have to do that? I've just created this thing, why can't it just be there? And int-var, these sort of objects which they just thought, wow, can't I just put an integer there? I know how to use integers, I know what that is already, why do I have to now mess around with something different? And really, to try to make it easier for them, I wanted to abstract this stuff away so that they didn't have to deal with it, and to make it much less complex and much more familiar.
So the next bit is verbosity. Again, I certainly find myself as a programmer, I had a really bad habit where I would generalize things and try and make things as succinct as possible. I don't know if it's some weird thing. I don't like a lot of characters on the screen. But that was what I tried to do, and I thought that was the right thing to do. However, if we're going to be friendly, names that people understand are really useful. So it's kind of like, don't be drawn to the dark side of meaningless names in the pursuit of saving characters. Again, the benefits don't outweigh the challenges of having a method that says 4x732y, or whatever that might stand for. Long names are okay, and there's another really important thing about verbosity, which is, again, I was so guilty of this. Don't display overly generic error messages. An error message is there to help somebody. It's about providing information, if it doesn't help somebody because there's just not enough stuff in there, or you've generalized it so much, it's not a good error message. Verbosity is okay.
So in terms of error messages, I wanted to make sure that kids could understand the errors that they were getting from guizero. So quite frequently in the classroom, kids would get sort of syntax errors or various different things, and they just didn't understand what they were, and they had no clue. So I made a decision to actually print out errors to the console, which is a little bit controversial. Me coming from a teacher background more than a developer background, lots of developers have said, well, that's a bit weird, you can't capture that, why can't you use warnings, why can't you do this, that, and the other? But actually I wanted to do that for the kids, so the primary audience of this is meant to be sort of kids and learners, and I've actually used this in workshops, and they have got things wrong. So for example, if you specify a grid layout, but you don't specify a coordinate on the grid for the thing that you're trying to put in, it doesn't show up. So you can tell them, the reason this thing isn't showing up is because you failed to specify a grid coordinate. And then that's nice and easy and understandable for them. And they can solve the problem straight away, rather than giving them some sort of jargon. And then, nobody likes getting an error in their program. Let's not frustrate people and annoy them or make them feel bad. Let's try and help them to solve it and move on. So that was the rationale.
So I'm going to labor this point. Meaningful names, how you name things can make a huge difference to how people perceive what it is that they're doing. Again, I've been guilty of this in the past. I've named my methods by what they do internally within the piece of software that I've created. I've not named them appropriate to what the user perceives it does. So just ask everybody to think about actually how users will interpret, the methods and the objects that you create, and make sure that they represent what they are going to perceive them at, not what you, as the person that created them, knows they do. So, seriously, this wound me up to an extent where I made a T-shirt made of this. I want to talk about de-iconifying. Does anyone know what de-iconifying means? Don't have to shout out, just a show of hands. One. You're getting a high five later. Right, so de-iconifying. Okay, so if you want to show a window using TK, sorry, I'm going to put that the other way. If you want to hide a window using TK, you withdraw it. There is a method called withdraw. Do you know what? I can kind of get that. It sort of makes some sense to me. What do you need to do if you need to make it show? You de-iconify it. Seriously, I just thought, why? Come on, what does that mean? It means absolutely nothing. It's completely meaningless. And there are two really important points I want to make here. So the first one is totally meaningless. Now the second one is, there was a reason that somebody did it. There's a reason this is like Windows 3.1. When you withdrew a window in window managers from the kind of early 90s, you withdrew it to an icon, and it went to a little icon. You didn't have taskbars in those days. It went to a little icon. So the guy that created it went, oh, I need to take it from its icon and show it again. So I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll de-iconify it. Just kind of see where you're going. But the second point I want to make is don't be afraid to refactor. If something made sense then, but it doesn't now, change it. We think almost too often that refactoring is a technical exercise. It should be an interface exercise as well. It should be about understanding how people are using it now. So yeah, don't de-iconify.
So one of the first things which I did when I first started creating guizero was rename most of the widgets. So they may not be necessarily the best names. I'm not quite sure what the best names are, but lots of those I named for things that kids would already be familiar with. For example, lots of kids will have had experience of Access, and I know that Access is probably not most people's favorite program, but it's something that they've seen, and they've used sort of that, and they've used other Microsoft products, and so they know what's a text box, and that kind of thing, and a combo box. And they don't know necessarily what an option menu is. So I decided, okay, well, let's rename it to something that they will know and they will understand and will be able to use. Just, again, to make it more familiar and to get them up and running more quickly.
So the last point I want to make is about documentation. Again, I talk about from my context because it's easy. I hated doing documentation when I was paid to be a developer. Oh, it's just like the worst day ever. Maybe I'm just built like that. I know lots of people love it. But documentation should be more than just a reference. It should be more than just an API kind of description. Documentation is the tool that you use to get people to understand what you are giving them. It should make it easy. It should be friendly. It should answer the questions that they have. So how to install, how to get started, recipes, typical things that people might want to do with the thing that you're giving them. How to build it for people that want to develop it, for people that want to, perhaps contribute to your open source project. An API reference is important, but only once somebody understands what it is and how to use it. Documentation is the tool that helps you connect with the people that are going to use your thing.
So this is another thing which I had a bit of a whinge about a couple of years ago. I cannot count the amount of things that I've gone, wow, that looks really cool. I think I tried and used that in my classroom, and then I've tried to install it, and then I've sort of torn my hair out for 20 minutes and then gone, I can't install this. I've got a computer science degree. Forget that. I'm not going to bother. So I really wanted to avoid that hole with guizero and to make something that people could get started with very, very quickly, and that there were examples of, here's a widget, here's exactly how to make it in the most basic form, just so that you can see what it looks like, and an example that works. So I really wanted to make the docs as good as they could possibly be. And to be honest, I think most teachers are probably terrified of API documentation. So most people just see something that looks really, really scary to them, and then they just think, I won't understand that, I can't do that, that's not for me. So having things like sort of really basic recipes, we have a lot of examples, for example, on guizero, that they're just code, and you can go and have a look at the example if you want to do a certain thing. There are also sort of little tutorials. There's a magazine article somewhere, just a collection of different resources. Teachers love resources, so if you put together anything that's going to save them time and is going to let them introduce whatever it is in the classroom, then they're going to be really, really happy with you, and they're going to use your software, guaranteed. Oh, it's still me. It's still me. So we wanted to say, obviously, guizero is something that Martin and I have put together to try and be useful in education and for teachers, but also for learners as well. So I just want to say a little bit about the impact that guizero has had, because if you make something and nobody uses it, what's the point, really? So just a few examples of this. This is something which a child who was 9 programmed. So it's a Wally robot, which is actually VNC'd into. So there's a little Raspberry Pi Zero in there, and they have VNC'd into it to control it with a guizero interface. Now, I'm not claiming that a 9-year-old did this entirely on their own. They were part of a code club, and they had a code club mentor helping them. But this is the kind of thing that it makes it accessible for kids to make, which maybe they may not have been able to do, or maybe they would just have had a less enjoyable experience doing had this not sort of been available. And also, this is actually some code from that robot. It's not the full code, so if you're thinking, why is there bits missing? Yes, of course, there are bits missing. Just to show that basically they wanted to make a nice layout, so they wanted to put the buttons forwards, turn left, turn right, that kind of thing in a grid, so they could put it in a grid. And then they made the buttons, as you can see at the bottom, and they had already written the function, so each function to go forwards or to turn left or right, and then they could very easily just link that up to a button on their GUI, which they can control with a tablet. And finally, I was asking some people on Twitter, if you have used guizero, what has been the impact for you? And these were a couple of replies which I had. So the top one is where a teacher has made a fruit machine kind of app kind of thing for the classroom. And there's a lot to be said. There's not a lot that you can do with sort of graphics and images. So lots of stuff that happens in the classroom with Python is largely text. So it's quite exciting for kids to be able to do things with pictures and images. So that's quite cool, and it's very easy to get started with that. And I guess, for me, the biggest validation is the tweet at the bottom, which, if you can't read it, basically says that a teacher used guizero in their classroom. It talks about waffling. There's something called a waffle, which is basically just a grid of pixels. It's called a waffle because it's like a potato waffle. But they used that, and then that resulted in kids wanting to do GCSE computing. So for me, that makes everything worthwhile. Super. And I think that we are probably open for some questions.
Yeah. So if you wanted to ask a question, there are some mics coming around, so hands up and we'll find a mic.
One question.
One question?
One question.
Oh, maybe the lady knew what D-iconify meant.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a question about users progressing with the software. So guizero is for people who learn, and at some points people get advanced, but there's some stuff in the middle. There's medium user, and how do you handle that? First of all, how do you decide that this is not going to go into guizero because it's for advanced users? And how do you write documentation for several user levels?
So should we cover that in 2 bits? Do you want to do
Shall
the
I
GUI 0 bit and I'll do the user level bit?
Yeah. So this is something that was really important to me. So I wanted to make sure that something was really, really basic and could get started on by a small child, for example, or sort of a really, really basic learner. But I didn't want to hold people back. So actually, when I first wrote GUI 0, it extended the TK-Inter widget, so you could actually just do everything that you could do in TK-Inter if you knew how to do it. The implementation is slightly different now, so it has actually an internal object from the TK-Inter, but you can still do that. So you can create an object, and then you can access all of the TK-Inter methods inside it if you know how to use them, if you know what they are, if you've looked them up. So you can sort of combine the easy stuff from GUI 0 with more advanced stuff if that's what you want to do, basically. And I thought that was really, really important, because then you're not holding people back just from, we haven't got round to implementing this, or we chose not to implement this because it's too tricky, but people can still use the bits that they want to use from GUI 0 and add to it.
Yeah, so I think in terms of creating resources that kind of span multiple levels, the first advice I would give is understand what your levels are. Yeah. So actually understand, what you can call it a curriculum if you want, but understand that you want your level 1 to be able to cover these things, your level 2 to be able to cover these things, your level 3 to be able to cover these things, because that way you can start to create some separation and actually some progression as well. Yeah. That would be my kind of first tip.
Thank you very much, Martin and Laura, for sharing the lessons learned from creating GUI 0 and insight into the iconification.
The iconification.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.